Real facts, real talk, real views across Michigan. We bring it to you. Stay informed, stay true with a bulletin news. News you can use.
Welcome to the Michigan Bulletin News. I'm Marcus Jefferson, publisher of the Michigan Bulletin and the host of Michigan Bulletin News. This is our Veterans Day special edition. My family has a long line of service. My uncles, my father. I was even in ROTC when I was at MSU. And today I have two military people with me, Congressman Tom Barrett, as well as PJ Anderson, our chaplain from the Navy. And before we get started, what I'd like to know from each of you is, what is your professional and personal passions?
Chaplain, do you want to go first?
I'll listen to you first.
Well, I had a lengthy career in the military before I went into public office and politics, and passions. It was a great adventure serving in the military, and I didn't know what direction that was going to take and how that was going to fundamentally change my life. And then having a family, raising kids, and trying to bring up the next generation. Those are really important things, and now I get the opportunity to do that in our nation's capital, something I definitely don't take for granted. But spending time with family and being able to appreciate the real bounty of opportunities that our country has, and those that helped inspire, create, and then protect that is really, inspirational and important, especially around Veterans Day.
Well, Brother Marcus, first of all, I want to thank you for this opportunity to be here on this platform. And I am very, very passionate now that I am retired from the U.S. Navy Chaplain Corps. Very passionate about our veterans. We are still losing 22 to suicide every day.
Oh, my.
And I want Space for Grace Without Walls, whose mission is to work with veterans in congregations, to have conversation about how the church and the veterans in these churches can reduce the number of suicide among veterans. Because I think that we, the federal government, have not been as aggressive as we could be about reducing the numbers. Because I don't think the answer is prevention. I think the answer is intervention. I think the answer is giving our service members the tools to face depression, to face post-traumatic stress disorder, to face suicide ideation as a part of their training while they are in the service, so that when they come out, it won't have such a punch.
Yeah. What they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure?
Worth a pound of cure. So that's my passion. That's what makes me get up every morning. That's what makes me write books like Healing My Soul on Purpose, A Veteran's Guide to Suicide Intervention. And I'm looking forward to working with, I was going to say my fellow congressman. Is this prophetic or what? Seriously, I am thinking about running for trustee next year because I live in Ingham County on the Holt, H-O-L-T, side of the line. But that's what just makes my life really worth living, quite honestly.
Oh, that's a very great goal. Matter of fact, Tom and I were talking about post-traumatic stress disorder and trauma before you came in, and everybody has been affected, and it has a domino effect. And
yes.
I did not know the problem was as great as it is, but that's very troubling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, we were also talking about Veterans Day, and I had talked to a young person about this, and it was scary. But anyway, I want to talk a little bit about the history of Veterans Day, and Tom and you and I, we can get started because we already talked about it a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, the history of Veterans Day and how it really stems out of the outgrowth of World War I and the Armistice that was signed, and the intentional decision to kind of commemorate that day. As we were saying before we started, that was said to be the war to end all wars. And how many wars have we had? How many wars continue to endure around the world, even still today? That World War I, didn't end all wars. If anything, it brought about,
World War II.
Right, and then you had the division of imperial territories after World War II that led to some of the ethnic conflict in other places around the world, some of which we're still seeing, today and whatnot. And so there is still a desire, though, to really commemorate the anniversary of the end of World War I when that was done. Originally as Armistice Day, and then later in the 1950s reorganized or redesignated as Veterans Day, kind of being more inclusive of all veterans of all times of service, of all different conflicts, even those who served in peacetime, regardless of the time in which they served or the capacity which they served. We want to be sure to commemorate and remember all veterans. And as you and I were discussing, it is distinct and different than Memorial Day.
Yeah, and then most people don't know the difference between Veterans Day and Memorial Day. They say, it's just the same. It's another parade.
Yeah, and they are distinct. I mean, both of which we honor the service of people who serve, but specifically on Memorial Day, those that lost their lives in pursuit of that, defense of our nation. And that is the highest sacrifice an individual can make. And that's why Memorial Day is so particularly profound and stoic and everything. And Veterans Day, while also important, is more encompassing of all veterans who served. So, yeah.
Now, one of the things we were also talking about, and this goes straight to you, most people do not know that the Coast Guard is part of the military. Every time they see the Coast Guard, they say, those are the people that catch the people that are the drugs in the water.
It's much more than that. But the Coast Guard is also a part of the Navy, as well as, in its own way, the Marine Corps.
That's interesting. I didn't know that part.
Yeah, the Navy chaplains serve both the Marines and the Coast Guard folk. Wow. even though they have their own placard, we are first cousins. All three of us are first cousins, right? Wow. and so it's easy to think that the Coast Guard is an entity that just catches drug transportation, but it does more than that. The Coast Guard, I'm not sure of everything that it did, and I missed going to the Coast Guard by that much. And I look back and I say, praise the Lord. I was on the USS Denver out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean doing maneuvers. And I prayed that night, the first night, and I cried, and I did everything I knew to do to get the prayer through that this would be my first and last time on a ship in the middle of a body of water, and that was my first and last time. And when I share that story, people say, well, for God's sake, you were in the Navy. I said, that is true. And I loved being in the Navy. I just didn't like being on the water.
I thought that was the intent behind the Navy, right? And
right.
I had to do some water survival training in the Army, and I was like,
yeah,
I'm glad I didn't go into the Navy because I wouldn't have made it. I barely made it out of that dunker training we did, and they flip you upside down. You got to get yourself out of basically an aircraft cockpit that they sink underwater, and I was not built for the Navy or the Coast Guard. Yeah,
you had the cockpit. We had what they call the Buttercup.
Okay.
And we did our training in Newport, Rhode Island, and the buttercups set in the Atlantic Ocean, and they would put us in the Atlantic Ocean after we had been taught how to survive, and they would open the bottom up, and the waters of the Atlantic Ocean would just rush in, and you had to figure out how to get out of that buttercup.
Yeah.
you know.
That sounds like fun. I don't think either one of you know this or not, but I'm a certified scuba diver since 2007.
Oh, my goodness.
There you go.
I've fed sharks and done a whole bunch of stuff.
That's amazing.
that people say, you must be crazy.
Yeah.
But I don't know what else the Coast Guard does. Do you?
Oh yeah, they do. They do a lot. They have the Coast Guard. They have icebreakers on the Great Lakes. They keep shipping lines open. They certainly intercept interdictions into the country for homeland security and homeland defense. They provide corridor security around our country and perimeter security that way. They do quite a bit.
Okay.
And
they don't serve as escorts, do they?
Escorts for
our ships in the ocean.
Probably to a certain point they do, but then I think the Navy, beyond a certain territorial limit, I think the Navy kind of takes over that mission. Yeah.
Tom, I remember maybe somebody from your staff sent it to me about some type of appropriation to get one of those icebreakers in the northern part of the state.
Yeah, so we are
expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, so we're procuring a number of icebreaker ships or vessels that the Coast Guard will use, and we've seen a number of deteriorating that we have in the inventory. We're now procuring several more, and we're trying to get at least one of the new icebreakers put on the Great Lakes to help for those, ability for shipping and keeping corridors open. Because when it gets awful cold up here, when the water freezes,
and it's coming soon.
A Coast Guard ice cutter to kind of chop through that to get other vessels to be able to get through. So it's an important mission that they have. They actually operate a kind of dormant now, but a radio tower. I had the Coast Guard in my office in Washington a couple of months ago, and I asked them if they had ever been assigned in the Aleutian Islands in Alaska, and the young man that was there had been stationed there for a while, and that's where my grandfather fought in World War II. Some of the only fighting of American troops on American soil was on the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. He was an Army soldier and was on the Aleutian Islands, and there is a almost uninhabited island in the Aleutian chain, Attu Island, I think it is, where the Coast Guard has a small relay tower or something that they occasionally go out and service. And he told me there's a monument there to the soldiers who fought there in World War II. And I told him
Fascinating.
I'd love to go out sometime when they're going out there to take a trip with the Coast Guard and actually see it firsthand and get a little connection of family history there that would be significant as well.
Wow.
Outstanding.
Speaking of World War II, I know you guys know what this hat is.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
But when I wear this hat and some people see it, and I said, there used to be an all-black crew that flew and did missions. And I said, do you see this the movie Red Tails? No. Do you remember when World War II might have been? Maybe the 40s? But it amazes me how a lot of people have no idea, that these guys were pilots. They did all the things that any other, airplane pilots and navigators and would do. And you just never thought about it.
I think we've probably, I don't know, maybe people thought that our children would learn by osmosis. Because there are a lot of things that our children do not know, that the next generation doesn't know, and we need to teach them. There's still time to teach them about the Tuskegee Airmen and about the Coast Guard being affiliated with the Navy and the history of World War I and your great grandfather, and those are valuable lessons that it would be good to pass on to our children. That if we, for an example, if the Honorable Congressman and I had occasions to go into high schools and not only talk about the history of the military, but talk about, pre-depression, because there are suicides going on in schools, in high schools. So it's not just the veterans, but all of us have had trauma.
Yes.
Of some sort or another. As a matter of fact, we're traumatized coming through the birth canal. So, I mean, that may be an idea that we may want to circulate to start re-educating high schoolers with what we know. And that can start right here in Lansing, and then who knows, Congress people and senators all over the country could start telling the story, and chaplains, retired chaplains, could volunteer to go to high school and talk to the high schoolers, and go to the ROTC places and talk to them about the history that they are about to embark upon. I mean, there are so many avenues to tell the history.
Yeah. Now, you might know this, Tom. Is there still a junior ROTC in the high schools? Back when I went, there used to be, but now I say that and they say, what?
Yeah, it's diminished a lot. Some schools have retained them or brought them back, and I think they've seen a lot of benefit, but it costs money to run those programs. And, through education funding model shifts and things like that, they've kind of the tendency has been to really eliminate a lot of the non-essential things. Like you see that whether that's in skilled trades, whether it's junior ROTC, whether it's shop class or other things that have really kind of fallen away. And I think we're seeing the effects of that are something that we're not comfortable with. And so I think bringing a lot of that back is beginning to happen to a degree. But yeah, I think that resiliency that you're describing and ability to handle issues that arise throughout your life. No one's going to go through life unscathed. And
correct.
Having some of that resiliency from the beginning is going to be helpful along the way. And
coping tools. You got to have coping
you
tools.
Have to.
Hey, my car broke down. I'm going to kill myself. No, you're going to take the bus.
Yeah.
Right. And the Army. I served in the Army just before 9/11 through just after the failed, botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. So my career was really bookended by that 20-year-long, war on terror. And the Army put a lot into suicide prevention, not necessarily intervention, to a degree intervention, but the idea of suicide prevention. And there is no, we can't really point to great success there. One of the most devastating statistics I saw is that during the 20-year-long war on terror, we lost just over 7,000 troops in combat fatalities on the battlefield between the various fronts of the war on terror. But we lost 30,000 troops of the same generation to suicide during that 20-year period. So 30,000 to suicide, 7,000 to combat action.
37,000 people.
Yeah. And it's like that disparity where you can survive the battlefield and come home and succumb to suicide is really a failure of so many different levels. After 9/11 and kind of shortly into the initial phase of both the war in Afghanistan and the war in Iraq, you had a younger generation of veterans coming home, and the VA wasn't really prepared for that new wave of veterans returning and the different levels of needs they were going to have. They had to adapt quickly. There were some reforms made. There were some scandals of shortcoming that the VA had. There's been a lot of effort to try and improve and correct a lot of that, and some strides have been made. But specifically in the space of veteran suicide, like you're talking about, we haven't really cracked the code entirely on that. And there's been some exploring of new methodologies for how we can treat mental health and suicide and suicidal ideation within veteran populations, some promising things that are a little bit more on the experimental front that the VA has been involved in, that I've been supportive of their efforts to do. There's a caucus of members of Congress, many of whom are veterans, many of whom are veterans of the post 9/11 generation, who are part of a effort to allow for experimental use of low-dose psychedelic treatment for veterans, for mental health treatment, that has shown a lot of promise.
Oh, so they're getting the mushrooms out, huh?
and with very specific, like microdosing of that, they've shown real substantial progress in the overall mental health and well-being of veterans.
Outstanding.
Who haven't responded to some of the more conventional mental health treatment, drugs and other things that, ironically enough, some of them have a side effect of suicidal ideation.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like this mental health treatment has with it the known side effect for some with suicidal ideation, and there are terribly gut-wrenching stories of parents and loved ones of veterans who went in for help for something, and it might have been anxiety or post-traumatic stress or something that was manageable that they went in for help with, got prescribed a course of medication, and very shortly thereafter died to suicide. And I'm not laying entirely the blame on the VA itself either, if that was the medical kind of accepted treatment at the time. But we also need to learn from that and learn how we can improve upon it and really hold open the door for alternative therapies that may have been, a little bit less accepted in the past, to see if those can provide better outcomes. And ultimately, the result of this we're trying to get to is better outcomes and a better quality of life for the men and women who served, and the obligation we have to them coming back to take the absolute best care of them that we can.
Well, I'm glad I got you two together, because there's over 24 million veterans out here, and it seems like we have a lot of mitigation to do when it comes to this trauma, the post-traumatic stress, even getting a living wage. And hopefully you two can get together and try to strategize on how we can reach more people.
Yes. My nephew's father-in-law was a Tuskegee Airman.
Oh, wow.
And I had the opportunity to interview him, and his interview is in one of the other books that I wrote several years ago. And if we're ever together again, I'll try to remember to bring a copy of that book with me.
Okay, well, guess what?
What?
In January and February, we have our Black History special editions, and I'm probably going to call upon you then, and I'll be getting with you guys about doing a tribute, and if there's somebody that you want to point out, that would be great too.
Okay.
Before we get off the air, is there anything that you want to say to our viewerships about what you're doing, or even give us an update on some of the things that are going on in Washington?
Sure. Yeah, we are continuing to work toward a resolution to this government shutdown, and I'm hoping we're making progress in that effort to get the government back open and functioning, so that people can rely on those things that the government provides that we need to be able to make good on. We're starting to see real devastating effects of whether it's air travel with air traffic controllers, whether it's with other people in the federal government not being paid, or whether it's with certain benefits like SNAP and other things that are now put at risk of not being funded because there's no appropriation in the federal government in which to do that. We have passed measures through the House of Representatives to fund the government, but they have stalled in the Senate right now, and that's something that I hope we're approaching a resolution on. I genuinely hope that we're getting closer to that, especially as Thanksgiving approaches and people are going to want to travel on that major holiday. And we're carefully and closely watching that. And then on the veterans space, as we approach Veterans Day, that's always a very significant occasion. I'm proud to serve on the Veteran Affairs Committee. I chair the subcommittee for technology and modernization for the VA, which is an important effort we're undertaking to upgrade the systems and technology within the VA. We spoke
the medical system.
Ahead of time about the electronic health record update that the VA is undertaking. Michigan will be the next state to receive that update at our 4 major hospitals in Michigan. That is coming in April this upcoming spring, and we're diligently working in that effort to make sure it's as seamless as possible. The benefit of that will be, number one, that you veterans, after we implement this, will have a seamless transition from their time in the military through their time being cared for at the VA. So the Department of Defense and the VA will have the same medical record system that will be consistent throughout. So they won't have one system here and another system there, and it doesn't port over. It'll be, as they say, a longitudinal record from the time you enter the military until the time that we, hand a flag to your family as we, inter your remains at a cemetery. At the end of your life, there will be a consistent record across, and then it will also allow veterans to take that record more and make it more portable with private, civilian health providers. Those right now, there's not a great way of taking your VA healthcare records to civilian health providers and back and forth. We are hoping that this will be a little bit more interoperable with civilian medical records and things. So a lot of veterans now increasingly are getting some of their health care through the VA and some through civilian private health providers, and we want to provide those opportunities in a little bit better interoperability. So it's going to be an undertaking. It's a lot to take on. We're carefully watching and managing that, but it has been the overwhelming share of the effort that we've undertaken on the subcommittee that I'm proud to be able to lead and chair and really dig into the hard work of making sure that gets done.
Okay.
Well, I tell you, I am very proud of the Lansing community and how people have pulled together to feed, to provide some supplementary food for the people who have been on SNAP. And the grocery stores that have been giving food to these places that are providing food to Lansing citizens, and that's very encouraging, and I appreciate the effort that's being done, and I pray that Capitol Hill will come. But I do have a question: why is it that Congress and the House and the Senate don't have to sacrifice their salaries? I'm just curious.
I made the decision to have my salary withheld during the shutdown.
Okay.
The Constitution sets forth provisions for requiring payment to members of Congress. That's actually in the Constitution itself.
Okay.
But members can individually decide to have their pay withheld during the shutdown, which some have decided to do, others have not. I made the decision early to do that.
Actually, you were one of the first because I got the press release.
Yeah, so we were one of the first ones to do that, and I thought it was the appropriate thing to do. And I thought it was in solidarity with a lot of our federal workers and others that are working without pay, that there ought to be some shared sacrifice there by members of Congress too. I mean, and ultimately, this could get resolved very quickly, and we can turn the lights back on, and everybody can, get paid and resume normal operation and everything else. And there's always going to be things that separate different political factions, political parties, ideologies. Like there's going to be disagreement. That's inherent within politics, right? We have a means of resolving our differences by having elections and electing people who go and make decisions and things like that. Doesn't mean we're all going to agree all the time. There's got to be a way of resolving our disagreement and still keeping the government functional and operating in the meantime. So it doesn't mean
I think
we're
it would resolve itself quite quickly if everybody had to give up their checks until
maybe. Yeah. The problem you see though is some members of Congress are independently very wealthy, and they're even further out of touch, if you will, at times with folks in their own districts, and less. This was a theme of one of my campaign themes last year was the fact that right now in Congress we have triple the number of millionaires in Congress. So there are 3 times as many millionaires as there are veterans. We're at an almost record low for veterans in Congress right now.
Okay.
We're at a record high and growing every year for millionaires in
Isn't
Congress.
that something?
Wow.
So we have 3 times more millionaires than we do veterans in Congress today. And I'm a veteran, not a millionaire. And so I'm one of those and everything. But I think that's important, right? It makes you more in tune with the realistic nature of what goes on in your community, because most people are not millionaires, and being aware of that, I think, is important. So
Actually, what do you think about this? And I remember somebody saying this years ago. No more outside campaign financing. The government finances everything. Everybody gets the same amount of money, and that way there's no influence. You can be who you want to be, and we'll know it.
Yeah, I know that there have been some ways of looking at how we get past this incessant, political money spending and things like that. The Supreme Court has been pretty clear about First Amendment protections. Like, you have a right to free speech. If you limit the ability to effectively campaign from an individual that wants to, you are kind of in some ways holding back their ability to criticize the government and have free speech and to do that. So if the government is in the business of funding the campaigns, they're also in the business of reducing the amount of speech that can be done. What if the government set a limit of $100 for a campaign? Well, you can't really say very much for $100. So they are then taking away your constitutional right to lay criticism at decisions that are made within the government. So you have to do those things in balance. I agree with the underlying premise, though, that it has gone completely out of control, the amount of spending in political campaigns.
Dark money, all this craziness.
My campaign last year, total spending for one seat in Congress was like $40 million combined. I mean, that's insane. And both sides arm up, because if one side unilaterally says, well, we're not going to spend to campaign, well, that side's going to lose. So then both sides spend more, and it becomes an arms race on both sides. And really what we're seeing is, across the landscape of Congress, there are 435 districts, maybe 25 or 30 are really, truly competitive. The rest are pretty tilt heavily to one side or the other without, within reason. There are some districts that, elect a member of, in their, maybe a more likely Democrat district but elect a Republican member, or vice versa. But ordinarily speaking, in most instances, the overwhelming 90% of districts in America or more are going to be almost predetermined to elect a Republican or a Democrat. And then you have very few that remain in the middle, so to speak, and can go either way. And they attract all of the spending that goes on. Last year, I was one of only 5 Republicans in the entire country that flipped a seat from Democrat to Republican. So out of 435 districts in the country, only 5 flipped from Democrat to Republican. So again, that is that's an interesting observation, at least, and probably a reflection of the increasingly polarized nature of our politics, where Republicans tend to live in communities around Republicans, Democrats tend to live in communities around Democrats. The congressional districts tend to reflect that, and there are very few districts then that have a balanced, nearly equal number of Republicans and Democrats in them.
Sounds like a lot of polarization. Now, what do you think about the gerrymandering? I know that's a popular subject these days.
Yeah, I'm actually working on a proposal I'm hoping to gain a little bit of support on, that would really just direct that redistricting would only be done once every 10 years at the census. I think doing this, midstream, as we've seen, has led to another escalation of an arms race between both sides. And, this one party changes it here, another party changes it there, and then you get this, really kind of, back and forth tit for tat effect. Texas changed, then California changed, then Illinois might, then this state might, and that state might. And I don't think at the end of the day, ordinary Americans see that as a good course of action. I think we ought to do it once every decade. People will disagree about the fairness, because your version of fair for a district might be different than mine or yours or someone else's. I think we should respect the fact that everybody has some bias within them as it relates to, drawing a map this way versus drawing it this way. There isn't a scientific way, so to speak, to determine what equals fair. One person's interpretation of that is going to be different.
I thought
than
it was
someone
already
else's.
every 10 years.
It is.
Okay.
So we do the census every 10 years, and then redistricting has to come after that. But a number of states this year, halfway through, 5 years into this 10-year cycle, have decided to change their district lines. So that has kind of opened the can of worms for retaliatory decisions by different states to try and extract more here or there or otherwise. Michigan, we have a state constitutional provision as to how we do redistricting, and ours are done every 10 years, and then there's this so-called independent commission that draws the lines. There's not, in my understanding, not a likelihood that our district lines are going to change anytime before the next census, but other states do it differently. I think we ought to do it once every 10 years. Frankly, I think we ought to count only citizens when we're counting in the census for the purpose of district lines.
I agree.
There are some states that will count everyone within that community holistically. So they're literally counting residents of the Chinese embassy in their redistricting, even though people there certainly can't vote and shouldn't be counted as constituents and things like that. Then you have communities that have harbored more people have entered the country illegally and are residing there. I think specifically as it relates to legislative district boundaries, we ought to only be counting citizens within them for the purpose of assigning, who that community will send as their member of Congress.
Before you close the show, the broadcast, I do want to say Happy Veterans Day.
Yes, Happy Veterans Day.
And to assure the veterans who are watching that there is one chaplain who is working on programs or working on making myself accessible to suicide intervention, and I will be working with the congressman to see if we can have more accessibility and really broaden this idea of openly talking about suicide intervention. It's not a stigma to get help. It's not and I know Marines in particular and Army men in general don't want to ask for help, but there's no shame to living and to finding out ways to live. I am here at your service as I was when I was on active duty.
Okay. Chaplain PJ, tell our viewers how they can get in contact with you if they want some additional information.
Well, I'm going to give out my personal cell phone number.
Uh-oh.
Maybe I ought to give out my business cell phone number, which is area code 517-488-8081. That is my business cell phone number. And I'm also on channel 19 from time to time. And so I give out both my email and my business telephone number on channel 19.
Well, give us your email now so that we'll have it.
The email is Dr. PJ Anderson, Dr. PJ, as in peace and justice, Anderson, Anderson, at gmail.com. That's my personal. My professional is Dr. PJ Anderson at spaceforgrace.org, spaceforgrace.org.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Now, how about you, Tom?
Yeah.
How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can go to barrett.house.gov. It's got my D.C. office contact information, my Lansing contact information. People can go there, and if they're coming to Washington, Chaplain, we'd love to have you out in Washington sometime and join us for some advocacy out there as well. If people are coming to Washington, we'd love to connect them with, whether they want to go to the White House or whether they want to, go to another one
museum
of the,
or anything. Huh?
Yeah, they can get in touch with my office. So go to barrett.house.gov. We have a portal where you can submit messages there. And we've also got contact information for both my Washington, D.C. office as well as my Lansing office, and happy to help. Whether it's a veteran working through, the process of navigating the VA system, whether it's a senior looking to, get their, Medicare or Social Security figured out, or another, we deal with tax return issues, people that, have a delay in that. We have immigration cases that we deal with. Anything that is related to the federal government and the application of federal law, we stand ready to help folks in whatever those are. If you want to weigh in on policy, we also get a lot of that comes through. So people tend to have strong opinions these days, which is fine. That's part of the American way, and we respect that, even those that do disagree with me from time to time. I thought I was doing a pretty good job, but we get some naysayers occasionally.
Sure.
We welcome their input as well, because, again, I take seriously the fact that, there are 800,000 people in the district I represent, and that's a big responsibility to carry their voice to Washington, D.C., to get on an airplane every week and go to our nation's capital and represent them, represent my family and their family, and try to make the best decisions we can, and to get insight from people that have different perspective than I do. Maybe they have an expertise on something I'm less familiar with. And one of the best parts about my job is really being exposed to facets of industry and individual unique circumstance that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to otherwise be exposed to, and kind of learn a little bit more from them along the way, and do my best to represent my district and move our country in the right direction. So, yeah.
Well, guess what?
What?
I'd like to thank both of you and wish both of you a happy Veterans Day. And I'm glad that I got you guys together, and hopefully this synergy can make a difference in a lot of veterans' life. This is Marcus Jefferson from the Michigan Bulletin News. Hopefully this was some news that you could use. And until we see each other again, may all of you have a wonderful life. Goodbye.
Thank you for having us.
Hello, my name is Marcus Jefferson, volunteer publisher of the Michigan Bulletin newspaper. We have served Lansing's community for over 23 years. We invite you and your organization to advertise in the Michigan Bulletin. It is easy as calling 517-321-1234 or emailing me at mjefferson@mibulletin.org. And you can like us on Facebook at the Michigan Bulletin at Marcus J. 59.